to get to know you a little bit, and then I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So, and I do recognize a few of you, like Matt works in the library, and I'm actually on the CID steering committee that Request is also on, so you might see my name float around with that. But how many of you are masters versus PhD? So masters, raise your hand, and then PhD. So a few PhD students. Okay, and how many of you are first years? Is this and how many are second years? Okay, and beyond that, third year, fourth year? So mostly first and second year. Okay, well, welcome. How many of you came to BYU in your undergrad? So a lot of you. Okay. So hopefully you are somewhat familiar with the library, right? You've been here a while, but I hope that I can share maybe some deeper strategies and share some information that you didn't know already. And so a little bit about me. I have a PhD in cognitive psychology. I went to Michigan State University to get that. And my focus in research ranged from working memory and how that relates to other higher order cognitive processes like reasoning and reading. And I continue to do some of that work here with Stephen Luke, who's in the psychology department. And I was also interested in self-regulation and how motivation plays a role in how we self-regulate. And since coming to the library, which I took this job after I worked at BYU Idaho for a couple of years in their psych department. But here my research has focused on other things as well. For example, I'm interested in how to help students write better, which is kind of a big deal. And I've developed some tutorials, and we're testing that and trying to publish our findings. And I'm also interested in emotion words in the scriptures. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Education in Zion Gallery, but there's an exhibit on this work that I did, studying the frequency of emotion words in the scriptures and whether those are being felt by human or deity. So you should go take a look over there. And on top of that, I have 4 kids that are range from 1 to 9. So I'm kind of crazy busy, but most of you probably feel that way too. So we're all in the same boat. All right, let's get started. So just a little bit of an outline, and you should have a handout. Hopefully those who are online got this via email. But this is really just a list of links, so I'm going to mention a lot of things in my presentation, and this will be the actual links that can take you to these places that I'm going to be talking about. So we're going to talk about library resources. I'm going to highlight a few kind of university and general resources you might not be aware of. And then I really want to focus on finding sources. Being able to understand the literature is a skill that you have to master as a grad student in order to be able to kind of ask your own question and figure out how to answer that question through your research. So to start off, I will admit that prior to becoming a librarian, I did not know that subject librarians existed. That's probably a huge fail on the part of my undergraduate and graduate school, I guess. I don't know. But I didn't know that they existed. So how many of you didn't know subject librarians existed? A few of you. So subject librarians are hired into the library to kind of liaison between the library and departments under the disciplines they cover. So I particularly serve this department, IP&T, the psychology department, and the counseling psychology department. And the requirement is that you'll have expertise in the subject area, and that would be like degrees in the subject area. And sometimes that's a master's, sometimes that's a PhD, and then kind of library expertise. So I was hired on without the library expertise, and I'm actually doing a master's of library science right now. So I totally get doing graduate work, because I'm still doing it at this point. But we manage collections, so we have control over budgets for books and journals and databases. And particularly for faculty and grad students, if you're interested in a particular, I have a lot of free reign in buying books. So if there are books that you feel like you need for your research, I can almost always get those for you. I know that we're often in the journal discipline, but sometimes books are important. Journals, I do have some flexibility with, and then databases some as well. But those are also more expensive typically, so that's why the flexibility isn't as great there. I also do library instruction, so this is, like, I would call this a library instruction session, and I do that for undergrads too. And then reference work. So this is where students can come in one-on-one to meet with me and talk about their research projects, whether that's kind of topic development, whether that's thesis development, whether that's kind of research design development. Primarily it's for help me find sources or help me find the information I need, but there's a range of things that I can help with there. And then I do engage in research. I kind of already described that. And then there's always committee work, which the CID, working on that committee, or steering committee, that kind of falls under that category. So that gives you an idea of subject librarians. Here at BYU, we're considered professional faculty. So our kind of tenure track is based off of librarianship, research, and committee work. So slightly different than professorial faculty. And then this map over here is just showing you where my office is. So I'm down on the first floor of the library. Oh, is it not even on?
No, take it off.
The
lanyard's rubbing it and it's causing a lot of static.
Oh, sorry.
So just sit on the podium.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because you're kind of staying in that area.
Okay. My bad.
So it's fine.
Sorry if you were like waving your arms and I was like,
It's okay.
yes, so this is my office 1210. I would be happy to have you come and meet with me if you want to have a conversation. I always say that I'm this really low pressure point in your educational trajectory, right? I'm not on your committee. I'm just here to support and to help you be successful as a grad student. And you can schedule an appointment using, so we have what are called subject guides. Have any of you been on a subject guide from the library page? So these are kind of web pages created by the subject specialists like myself that help kind of list resources relevant to a particular topic. And each one of these has this profile box, and you can click on this button and see when my calendar is available. And just like I said, so this is a screenshot of a research guide. It actually looks a little bit different because I've added a couple of things lately, but this helps you know how to find articles or find books or tests and measures or statistics or publications, information about kind of publishing. I have the psych guide, but other guides that might be relevant to you are the education guide. That one is built by Rachel Wada. You might have met her. She and I kind of have oversight over different departments in IP&T, but before I came, she was the liaison for IP&T. So we still kind of have a little bit of overlap in who we serve. There's also an information technology page and an organizational leadership page that you might be interested in. Okay, so I wanted to make sure you are aware of the library perks that you have. So one of them is there's actually a research guide just for graduate students that kind of go over services that are available for you. So I'd highly recommend that you go look at that. Hold, this is just where if you're at home and you're looking for something and you find a book that you want to read, you can actually put it on hold and then you would come to the library and pick it up at the third floor circulation desk, instead of having to go actually find that on the shelf, which is a useful skill, but it could save you time to put it on hold. And if you didn't know it, you can check out up to 75 items for 13 weeks. So you could create a library in your home and pretend you own a lot of books. Like staging for a date or something, I don't know. And then, how many of you are regularly using interlibrary loan service? So, how many of you know what it is and could confidently use it? So, not halfway. Let's, okay, when I'm done with my slides, or you know what, why don't we be flexible and just go out and look right now. So, let me get out of that. And we'll go to the library page. And I'm actually going to go from the entry point of a database just so you see what it looks like. So I'll go to PsycInfo, and we'll just do a random search for the working memory. So let's say I click the Get It at BYU, and it's probably going to say that it's available, but oh, that was pretty awesome. Okay, so this is not available online. So what I could do is click this. We don't have the full text. It's going to come to this page. If you've never filled out, logged in from this page before, the first time through you'll have to fill out a little form. But let me show you what it looks like when you log in the second time. And I'm going to get a duo. Just should have anticipated that. Oh, this doesn't. I think it might be. Oh, it didn't. Oh, just kidding. I thought it would have the duo authentication. Okay, so this is what it pulls up. Notice it tries to pull from the metadata of that article record and just provide the information in the form for you. But it did miss a couple things like journal volume and journal issues, so you'd have to go back and try and gather that from the record here. And then the other thing is it only wants the year, not the month and date, so you'll always kind of have to delete the month and date. But you just double check the information and click submit. And then if you were just on this kind of main page of interlibrary loan, it would look like this. So if I had clicked submit, then it would be in process. If it were available for use, meaning our interlibrary loan students and staff had located the PDF for that article, it would now have a link here where you could download it. And this would be for books if you had gone through interlibrary loan for that. And I mean, I think that the term interlibrary loan is kind of off-putting, right? Because it sounds like, what am I going to have to pay for? But this is a service that we provide, and we foot the bill. So please use this. It's bad science to not gather all the information that's relevant to your topic. So don't let kind of this, it's not right at my fingertips, stop you from getting the information that you need. Any questions about interlibrary loan? Yeah.
How long does it take usually?
Oh yeah, good question. So with articles, it's usually 1 to 2 days. With books, obviously it has to physically get here, so that lengthens maybe out to a week, but it's pretty fast. So, any other questions? All right, well, I'm glad that we went over that because we can't pay for everything up front, but if we can pay for it through this format, we would love to. All right, let me go back to my slides. And the last thing on this list is the multimedia lab. Have any of you been to the 4th floor multimedia lab? What have you used it for?
I work there.
Oh, you work there? Sorry, I didn't know you worked at the
We're
library.
good.
Yeah, in the back.
I've used the audio recording studio and video recordings.
And did you use it for research, meaning like building something for your study, or?
Well,
Mine.
more like class project.
Class project, okay.
Oh, sorry.
And Matt, you obviously work on the 4th floor as well, but what have you used the multimedia lab for?
Similar stuff like the video production stuff. We rented cameras and a lot of soft focus. We rented cameras and also ran software training help.
Great. And if I'm missing a hand over on the remote students, please, any of you let me know if I miss it. So I want to make sure that I get everyone's questions answered. But the multimedia lab has like cameras, there's a sound booth, there's a recording studio, and just depending on the type of research you're doing or the projects you're doing, it might be useful. All right, next let's talk about bibliography managers. I believe IP&T leans towards Mendeley, is that correct? Maybe not? How many of you use a reference manager? So maybe half of you. Which ones do you use?
Mendeley.
Mendeley, okay. So Tarot, okay. RefWorks. So the library kind of promotes RefWorks because that's the one we pay for. A lot of these other ones are free, but they sometimes have limits on like how much storage you can have. How many of you don't know what a bibliography manager is or does for you? All right, awesome. I would just suggest if you're not using one, pick one. And if you have one that you're using, just make sure that you kind of consistently use it so you're not trying to manage your articles across kind of your computer and this reference manager. Any questions about bibliography managers? Yeah.
The RefWorks, does it continue after a student, or do you have to buy it?
It does continue after you're a student. So that is kind of a perk of that. So, And Mendeley, RefWorks recently went through like it got a new version came out, and I would say at this point it is pretty comparable to the other programs that are out there. Before I would not have said that, but now I confidently can say that. Okay, next let's talk about institutional repositories. Does anybody know what this is? Yes?
Yes.
Tell me about it. What do you know?
We have our so we just are starting to use a repository for our department where students can upload their projects and everybody can look at them.
And is this through the library, or is this, okay, cool.
Yep.
So all theses and dissertations at this point are housed in our institutional repository, which is called Scholars Archive. But yes, students can upload other publications that they have, and this provides open access to these publications that you have. You do have to follow, copyright, what your author-publisher agreement is, but it provides, access. First of all, it also kind of increases visibility. We recently switched to a new platform of where we're storing the data on the repository, and the Google hits, the number of downloads that we're getting has increased like astronomically. I mean, that might be a little bit of hyperbole, but pretty close. So over here, I just put for 2017 faculty papers, of which there are 69 from IP&T. They had 1,900 downloads, but of the 170 theses and dissertations, over 16,000 downloads in the course of 2017. So they're getting used in this repository. And what's great is if you're an author, you end up having this dashboard look at what the papers that you have in the repository, and you can see like how many downloads you're getting per month. And I mean, these are, if you're thinking of continuing academia, being able to track the impact of your work is important, which this repository can give you some data related to that. And I just want to make you aware that it's not just papers. We can actually store data in this repository too. So a lot of granting agencies nowadays are requiring that data is made publicly available. So if you have that requirement, you can use our repository to store your data. And then maybe more for faculty, but you could store presentations or teaching materials that you wanted to have open access as well. Any questions about the institutional repository?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
Do you guys use selected works with the digital repository?
Use selected works?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm familiar with that. What is it?
Oh, because I know the repository you guys use is a digital commons.
Yes, digital commons. Is selected works like another?
Yeah, it's like personal web pages for the faculty to put up their papers and stuff there. So just curious to use that.
I don't know, but I'm willing to. I'm actually also on the scholarly communications committee in the library, so I can take that and look into it and see how it would connect or what it would look like. So I'd be happy to do that. Any other questions? All right. So copyright, this connects to the institutional repository. A lot of times with publishers and articles in journals, they dictate what version of your article you can post on a repository, or even on a place like ResearchGate or fdmu.edu. And most frequently, they require you to do the preprint version, which is preprint or postprint. So preprint would be like the article you first submitted to the journal. The postprint would be the version that was accepted by the journal kind of after you went through the review process, but is not in the publisher kind of format. And then not as frequently do they allow you to actually post the publisher version on an institutional repository. But they usually are a little bit more friendly with posting on institutional repositories than they are posting on kind of these proprietary like ResearchGate websites. But you do have to kind of pay attention to that, and you might want to start thinking about, you know, what rights you want for the works that you're publishing, and kind of look at that information before you actually publish, so you know what your rights are. And sometimes you can even try and negotiate those. Yeah.
Good question
Oh,
out here
yeah.
from Sandy.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Is there a way to get a digital copy of a dissertation that is currently a hard copy in the library?
That is a good question. I would imagine the answer to that is yes. So we have, I think I skimmed over this, it was on my slide, but we have what we call article delivery, which is you could essentially put in an interlibrary loan request for an article that is in our library in print format, but essentially our library students would go and copy that and make it available. So even though we have it, you can make that article request. So I imagine you could do that for a dissertation and they would do the same thing. Thank you. Yes, so coming back to copyright, just so you know, there's this really pretty easy to use website called Sherpa Romeo, where you can actually go and search the title of a journal, and they have kind of pulled information about what their author rights are for most journals. They don't always do it for every journal, but it just allows you to get a quick look at what do they allow me to post on my personal website or my institutional website or these other kind of ResearchGate type websites. So I hope that you're starting to think about these kinds of things, even though you're a grad student. It's important to be thinking about information and the information you're creating and how it's going to be used or what rights you have to use it in the future. Any questions about copyright? There's also, I kind of referenced on the handout a lot of Copyright Office websites that talk about what do I need to know about fair use? What do I need to know about, you know, using other people's materials when I'm teaching? And that's also, especially where you guys are in this field of education and teaching, you need to understand what kind of materials you can or can't use when you're developing teaching resources. Okay, and then this is kind of the last piece of general/university resources. I just want you to, depending on your career path, you might be interested in how do I get people to pay me to do the stuff I want to do, and otherwise known as grants. And I have a library guide that talks about grants and like finding funding and writing the grant, etc. There's also research development offices. Just recently there was an individual hired for the McKay School, and her name is escaping me.
Jane Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. So she's available as a resource, and this group runs workshops for grad students about the grant writing process. So if you're not on their newsletter, I would go to their website and get on the newsletter so you can start to hear about these workshops that go on. And then we provide access to Pivot, which is a database for searching for funding, which is, most of the databases we have are searching for articles and resources like that. But Pivot is searching for funding. So it's good to know about. Okay, so these are like my miscellaneous words of wisdom from Emily Swenson Darowski. So first off, I think that these are kind of like maybe things I wish I would have known or I would have done better when I was in grad school. So first off, it's so important to network and just put yourself out there and talk to people and share your ideas. And this is connected to the be willing to fail. Sometimes it's hard to share ideas when you don't feel like they're 100% polished, but the idea won't get better if you don't bounce it off of other people. And you guys are all about design thinking and creativity and innovation, and you have to be able to share your idea to get that iterative process going. Next, I actually don't know what I meant by research journals. Oh, maybe I'll talk about that when we get to Scopus a little bit. File naming conventions. This is just a plug for, in general, keep track of what you're doing, because even 6 months later you can come back to files that you created and not know why, what it is or what the content is, or if you have data files and you think you intuitively name your columns and your rows, and then later come back and you haven't really given yourself like a data description document that describes each of the columns. And if you don't keep track of versioning, meaning and easy ways of knowing which is the most recent file that you created, especially with data where you might be going from raw to kind of treating that data and cleaning it up. I just build habits now that allow you to use your data now and be able to use the data later. And even in your writing, know which of your files are the most recent. And then I remember meeting with a committee, one of my dissertation committee members, and he just kind of said, the point of going to school is to change the way you think. And I think that's critical. That you should expect to see the way you think, the way you approach problems, the way you approach your discipline. That should evolve over time, and you should be proud of that evolution. And I think it's important to balance your life. I also had a friend in grad school who said, if you give 90% of your life into grad school now, then that's, you're only going to have to eke out that much of your life as you continue into your career. And her words of wisdom were basically, find what percentage you're willing to give to these different pieces of your life and make sure you maintain that, so that you can give as much as you want to grad school, to your career, but that it doesn't eat out like your ability to have other priorities, whether that's family or whether that's socializing, whether that's personal time. You just have to make sure that you give yourself the time that you want and start those habits now. All right, the last portion here is I want to talk about finding information using library sources. So I know that most of you have been here at BYU for many years, so you have skills. So I'm hoping that I can teach you some new ways of using those skills, or maybe we can have this conversation about where you're finding those skills are kind of hitting a barrier, and hopefully I can help you get past that barrier. So these are just some of the strategies that I use for finding information, and this little graphic here is just the idea that I'm all about, let's use different strategies. If this strategy isn't working, let's try a new strategy and kind of hone in on the information that we need. So you can search by author, you can search conference proceedings, you can find journals that typically publish information relevant to your research and kind of comb through that particular journal. You can use multiple databases. Notice I list several over here, and we'll kind of poke around in some of those. You can make sure that you're keeping a list of keywords as you're doing your research. You might go in with, this is the terminology I'm searching for, but as you start reading, you should be critically thinking about what words or phrases are they using that I could create better search queries from. And obviously you can play around with multiple combinations. I don't know if there's a marker, but maybe not. But if you've got like 4 components that you're researching, obviously you can search for all 4 combined, but you can also play around with A and B and C and D, or A, B, and C, and B, C, and D. And by finding research that talks about different aspects of your topic, you can be the one to make those connections across articles and build an argument about your research. And then I also want to talk about cited references, and time cited. So if we have an article that we're reading, obviously you can read who they cited, but I want to make sure that you know how to take that article and find who referenced them in the future. I mean, the idea is you're finding this trail of the conversation. I mean, these articles, this is how researchers are talking to each other. And if you can find out what were they saying in the past and what they're saying, after this current thing that you're reading, then you can see this this trail of thinking and kind of follow it through. So, if you have laptops, I would love for you to open them up and let's try and kind of practice some searching together. So, starting from this home page, which you're all familiar with, I'm sure, if we go to research guides, I can show you, just while you're getting your stuff pulled up, I'll show you a couple of the subject guides I was talking about. So this is the one on grant writing. So notice there's a tab about finding funding. I have information about BYU funding and national funding. There's kind of references to other people who have written about writing a grant, and then there's resources for how to manage a grant from post-award management to data management to reporting. So that's one of the subject guides. And then we'll come to the psychology one. So it looks a little bit different from the screenshot. So the tabs I have now that I kind of added was find clinical tools, which that's not going to be super relevant to you. We just have some resources for those who are doing more clinical work. APA style, you're probably hopefully becoming masters at that. I'm assuming you all write APA. So, but there's some references there. Find articles. So I want to poke around some of these databases and show you some strategies that I use to search them. So first I want to pause and say, what databases do you use most frequently to search for articles in your discipline? Yeah?
Eric?
Eric, education, yes, awesome.
Scopus.
Scopus, I love Scopus. I'm going to hopefully convert you all to using Scopus today if you aren't already converted. Yeah?
Whenever I am doing anything that deals with language, I do ACTFul.
ACTFul?
Uh-huh.
Okay, cool. Any other databases? Do you use PsycInfo? Yes, no, you? Okay, maybe we won't spend much time there then. I'd rather spend time where you're at. How many of you use Google Scholar? So what do you use, I'm curious, what do you use Google Scholar for? Time-cited? Okay. Yeah.
But I can't find the PDF through the library's website,
Sometimes you
and I
can
really
find
want
them.
the PDF.
Because a lot of times they'll have the ResearchGate link over there,
Yeah.
which is probably an illegal copy, technically, but it is an access point. So, I primarily use Google Scholar for doing time-cited searches. I don't typically do it for a just general topic search, just because you're always going to get a million results, and it's like, at what page do I stop looking? Like when I fall asleep, then I guess that's the point. But I also use Google Scholar if I'm kind of striking out in the library databases. Google Scholar I can take in a sentence format or a question format, and it can handle that kind of a search better, whereas the library databases you really have to have the keyword searches to use. All right, so I'm not going to, let's pull up an ERIC actually. So first off, if you didn't know, there's this thesaurus. How many of you have used the thesaurus before?
You guys won't watch your mics.
Oh.
I guess at night.
Oh. Is it turned on?
Yeah.
Does that work? Awesome. So the thesaurus, this is kind of their way of indexing subject terms. So when an article comes into a database like this, there's someone behind the scenes creating the metadata for that, filling out the fields of who the author is, the title. A keyword field in these kinds of databases, those are typically the words that the authors chose when they were submitting the paper. But there's usually a subject field, like in medical databases, it's called mesh terms. But in ERIC and also in PsycInfo, there's this database or thesaurus where this is a list of subject terms that they kind of tag for every time a new article comes in. So we can search for, somebody maybe throw out a keyword that's relevant to their research, and we'll see if we can find it.
Creativity.
Creativity. Oh, I bet we'll Thank you for choosing an easy one. Appreciate it. So then you can click on this word, and it's going to come up with several things. So it's going to give you a scope note. This is this is how we're defining it when we tag for it. And then broader terms, narrower terms, related terms. And you can, what's great is you can kind of go down these different paths and find all of the subject terms that relate to what you're interested in. So I could say creativity, creative thinking, maybe creative teaching, creative activities. I mean, I don't really even have a topic. I'm just picking randomly, but you get the idea. And then I say, notice here it says select term, then add to search using. And I'm going to use or because all of these words are kind of about the same thing. So I'll add that. It will create a search query for me. It has this DE, which means it's searching the subject field of the record. If you wanted it to search this term wherever, then you could just delete that DE, and then it's going to search the title, abstract, etc. But we'll keep the DE for now and say search. Obviously, this is, I'm always looking for a low number of results to search. I think it's awesome if it's 10, 20. I can quickly look over those, find new keywords, refine my search, and keep going. Like I don't want 16,000. But what I do want to point out is, let's say I come back to the thesaurus and let's do teaching. And didn't like that, sorry. We would probably want instruction. And then I could say, oh, I'm interested in college instruction. Maybe kind of all of these things that might be at a college. Then I create another search. So now I've done, again, remember earlier I talked about like you have A, B, C, and D. I'm running these components separately. So I've so far done like A and B. But what is useful about that is you can come to your search history. I'm going to clear out. And then you have all of these individual searches here. And you can play around with how you combine them. So if you did A, B, C, and D, then on this database you can play around with whether you do A and B, or if we had C and D here, then we could do all of them, or 3 of them, or 2 of them. And if I select them, then I say search with and. And we now have 1,200. That's still quite a few, but it's a lot fewer than 90 or 16,000. And of course you can use limiters over here. How many of you frequently use these limiters on the left-hand side? Yeah, what do you use?
Relevance, or I guess publication date.
Publication date. So we probably don't need stuff from the 1950s at this point. So you could narrow that to the last 7 years or whatever, 5 years, yeah. Matt, what do you use?
Yeah, usually that or peer review.
Peer reviewed, okay. And there is one, yeah. What do you use it for?
Full text.
Full text. Okay, so
Again, I don't like looking for things if I can't find them. It's like I want to go to the library and get a book. I just want to find it right now.
That convenience is nice, but I'm going to go back to my comment about good science, bad science. I'm only going to research stuff that's like right here. Maybe you should, click get it at BYU and go a little bit farther. Notice the subject terms are over here. You could limit to some of these different subjects. If you're in Psych Info, what's great about that database is there's a lot more limiters. You can limit by age, you can limit by gender, you can limit by publication type, you can limit by methodology. Maybe let me just show you that. This is my working memory search that I just did. And notice it has a thesaurus too in Psych Info. But then I could say, I'm really only interested in articles that are, school-age children. And you could limit for that. Also, methodology. So I think this is great if you're looking for lit reviews, or maybe you were interested in what meta-analyses exist. So I kind of get the overview of my topic. systematic review. It's just great for if you're interested in a particular methodology. The other thing that's great about PsycInfo is that it lists tests and measures. So they try and tag for every test and measure that a publication has. And if you did a topic search, then you could look at this to see what measures are typically used when I'm getting back articles surrounding my search terms. So clearly I did just working memory, which has, I don't even remember how many, it was thousands and thousands of articles. But in a sense, this tells me what are the most commonly used measures in working memory studies. And you could do the same kind of glance for your own topic. How many of you are actively trying to find tests and measures for your studies? Or are you typically developing your own, or in the master's program, are you actively running a study as part of your program? Or are you mostly using other people's data?
A lot of our students do projects.
Do what?
Well, a lot of our master's students do projects.
Okay, and what, when you say project,
So conducting a design project or conducting an evaluation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not so much I'm going to use a questionnaire someone else has developed. You're probably developing your own information. Okay, good to know. If you are, just as a frame of reference though, if we come to find tests and measures and you click on psych tests, this is where you could find a lot of those. If it's a questionnaire, you could find a questionnaire. So, thank you. We've got 5 minutes. So just so you know, psych test allows you to search for tests and measures if you're interested, and a lot of times the actual questions are right there, so you can use them. All right, I want to spend the last 5 minutes in Scopus. So I know that there was at least one high user of Scopus. Anybody else use Scopus a lot? Okay. Scopus is awesome because it allows you to do some really cool kind of visual analysis of the articles that you're finding. So let's just keep with the creativity theme here, and college and instruction, and we'll say search. So first off, let me make that a little bit bigger. Right now it is sorting, I'm going to make that a little smaller, I'm just kidding. Right now it's sorting by date, but you can sort by time cited, highest to lowest. So Google Scholar, you can take an article and find how many times it's been cited, but you can't sort by time cited in Google Scholar, at least that I know of. So looking off to the right, you can see how many times the article has been cited, and you can click on that, which for me is a great mini search, right? I find an article that's interesting, I look at who has cited them, and oftentimes the conversation has been carried forward, and that's relevant to my understanding of my topic. Yeah?
A question about how to log into Scopus for the first time.
Oh, so if you're coming from my subject guide, and you're off campus, and you click on the database, you maybe have to do authentication using your NetID and password, but you shouldn't have to log in if you don't want to. But most of these databases, you can create an account for every database we have, and then you could kind of manage folders of things that you found in that database. Does that answer the question? Well, maybe type what your follow-up is about logging in. I'd be happy to answer it. The other thing is this analyze search results. So what's great here is it plots it by time and several other types of information. So this might give you a good sense of what was the kind of height of this research. Is it still kind of climbing? Did it have peaks and valleys? You can see this one is maybe a little bit, has ebbed and flowed over the last 18 years. And then you can go to the articles from a particular year. You can also see source. I think this is great for those of you who are interested in publishing your work. if you are interested in a particular topic and you can see where people are publishing that type of work, then these are kind of, and you can click on the journal. Let's open this in a new tab to see metrics about that journal. So what their ranking is. They have various measures of how many times their articles are cited. They give you some rankings in different categories, but you could kind of gauge for both my topic and kind of the tier or the impact of the journal I want to publish in. You could explore that through this mechanism. And then with author, this is also gives you a great idea of who the key players are that are talking about your topic, and you could then search for the 16 documents that came up for this topic search, or you could click on the author's name and it would take you to all of their works that are existing in this database. And then there's also, say, document type if you're interested in a review in particular versus a regular article. But I think Scopus has a lot of utility in terms of these visual analytics, but also in sorting by time cited and also searching for a particular article and then seeing how many times it's been cited and doing that and then looking at those articles. But I think that my time is up. So, and then how do I log into, I'm on campus and it's asking for a login to create an account.
An instructional account, or do I just create a new personal account?
Did you get this Scopus to BYU?
Yes, I linked to it. Did you go to it from the library page?
Yeah.
That's odd to me. I have to go back and kind of ask our electronic resources librarian, and maybe you could type out your email, and I'll get back to you about whether that should be happening or not. Thanks. Any last questions about what you can get out of the library, what you can do to be more efficient with library resources? Hey, I converted someone.
How's the beer credentials?
Well, I will just close by saying, if I can help you in any way to be successful in your program, I would love to be that for you or do that for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to the library. And for the faculty too, please contact me if I can do anything for you as well. So thanks.
All right,